are seeing us.
Where is
just none right now?
0.
Axis 0. Right, 0. Green. Yeah.
So we can still make funny faces.
Yeah, you can still do that.
And then suddenly it's delayed, and then I got my thumbs in my ears and it jumped to 655.
Right.
So this is now propagating through Facebook's system, I think.
Yes. Yep, and it takes just a second. We got 6 on that.
There you go.
Yep.
I'm still waiting for the breakfast buffet to open.
It's on its way.
All right, we'll give it another minute or two here before we get started.
Yeah.
You can address and say, hey folks, we're starting shortly.
Yeah. All right, for those of you who have joined, we see a few folks saying hello. Hello back to you. We're going to give it another minute here while we wait for the rest of the audience to join. So bear with us for just a minute while we wait for everybody to join.
You might even mention that we know that so many have not deployed yet. And presume that everybody on the call hasn't deployed yet.
Can you All right, we'll give it another minute here. We're just a little bit after the hour, but we're going to give it another minute and allow some other additional folks to join here.
Let's see the comments. So, just showing, and highlighting too.
Show the name. Oh, yeah, if I put show on ours, it'll show my name.
So the right pane is what the attendees are saying.
That's the live view.
Got it. Good answer.
We good at that. Jeez. Right up the first name. Got that one. Give it a minute or go ahead.
We can get started.
All right, we will go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you for joining for this AM session of Demystifying the ELD Mandate. So I know that's everybody's favorite topic in the industry. I think it's on every publication in transportation. It's on everybody's mind. And so here at truckstop.com, we'd like to welcome some of the professionals within the industry here for this panel, and we'll get into those introductions in just a moment here. But again, wanted to take a minute to express our gratitude for everybody joining. And we want this to be an interactive session, so please feel free to pose your questions, and we'll get to those questions here in just a few minutes. But again, we wanted to introduce our panel. So we have Craig Jolly with HOS Reporter here. We have David Gray with Glostone Trucking Solutions. And remotely, we have Travis Baskin with Keep Trucking on our panel this morning. So if you gentlemen want to take a few minutes and introduce yourselves and your company and kind of what's unique about your operations and what you do and what you provide to the industry.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
So HOS Reporter is a partnership between Connected Holdings and Global Telematic Solutions. We've been in the fleet tracking and telematics space for a number of years. We've worked actually closely with Truckstop for the last few years in telematic solutions and hardware. It was a natural thing for us to want to participate in the ELD marketplace. We've spent quite a bit of time trying to address the part of the market that's probably a little less served, the owner-operator and small fleet market. So we built an AOBRD and ELD in a single solution. I think Travis and his company have done the same thing. So HOS Reporter is all about helping the little guy get through this mandate in the most efficient way possible, and helping him, of course, make that step into the next generation of logs, basically.
Perfect, thank you, Craig. Dave?
Hi, Glostone Trucking Solutions. Our primary business is regulatory compliance. We work with all kinds of carriers, owner-operators, all the way up to some large fleets. But our primary focus is in regulatory compliance. The IFTA, the IRP, we work with log auditing and safety compliance and all of that. And as the ELD mandate became more of a thing and soon to be
The real deal.
We searched out different solutions for the ELD for our clients, and we represent Geotab, that product line, but we also, depending on what our client's operation is, may refer something else. So we from the ELD standpoint, we try to take go from what does the carrier need and what is the best product for them.
Perfect, thank you, Dave. Travis?
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Travis from Keep Truckin'. What, as kind of Craig indicated, what we do is we've manufactured and designed what we perceive as one of the better, more user-friendly ELD solutions on the marketplace. And what the way that we began, we're a California-based company. We developed our solution from the ground up, based specifically on the regulation and the ELD mandate rule that came out in 2012. We're backed by Google, so we've got staying power, and I think that one of the benefits that we bring to this marketplace is that we approach this old problem with a new way of thinking and a new solution. So we're a modern company for an older industry, and we're really excited to help bring the fleet management and this trucking industry in America up to into the 21st century. So we're really excited to be here.
Excellent. Again, we're grateful for you guys joining today. Really appreciate you guys taking time. I know it's a crazy time right now. I'm sure your folks are on the phones 24/7 answering questions. But again, we wanted to use this opportunity to get those questions answered. But first and foremost, let's get the important stuff out of the way. Greatest quarterback in the NFL of all time. Travis, let's start with you.
So as a Texan, I really want to go back and say that it's Roger Staubach, but as a member of Keep Truckin' and as I've somewhat been converted, I've got to go with Joe Montana.
Joe Montana. All right, I should have prefaced, if anybody says Tom Brady, you're immediately kicked off the panel. So, Dave, how about you?
Well, you stole my thunder. I'm a longtime Joe Montana fan.
Joe Montana, all right.
I would have said old school Bart Starr, new school would have to be Peyton Manning.
Okay, well, you're all wrong. It's Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. So, moving forward and getting back into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, I want to talk about all the acronyms that are thrown around about the mandate. There's so many. I want to understand what they all mean. So, a few of those that I'm going to throw out there and ask the panel to answer these. What does BYOD mean? What does AOBRD mean? And what does ELD mean? And what are some of the differences and how do they roll up into this mandate?
So how do you want to carve
that? We'll start out with you again here, Craig. So what is BYOD?
BYOD is an acronym for Bring Your Own Device. Every ELD and most AOBRDs have an engine-connected device. That engine-connected device will communicate either wirelessly or directly connected to a display screen. So the BYOD is referencing bring your own display device. It can be a tablet, it can be a smartphone, it can be a dedicated single-purpose device, but BYOD means a solution built around an engine-connected device that wirelessly connects with an in-cab screen that the driver would carry, and it's that part that the driver would be bringing their own.
Perfect. And the caveat as it relates to the mandate is when that is being used as an ELD, it has to be mounted. Is that correct?
It does, and it has to be in the visual line of sight of the driver. The driver has to be able to receive audible and visual alerts to changes in duty status or potential violations. We recommend, and Travis and Dave, I'm sure you guys agree, that a dedicated device, a device dedicated to compliance with this mandate, if you're trying to use the same screen for taking phone calls and paying bills, surfing the web, you're going to run into potential compliance problems or out of compliance situations. So we recommend, but it's not necessary, that it be a dedicated edge device or bring your own device, tablet, smartphone, that kind of thing.
And we've found that our clients that have already converted to an ELD and they wanted to use their smartphone and quickly decided that they don't want to do that because again, it has to be mounted, it has to be on continual being powered, because it does take a lot of power and it'll run down to your smartphone to nothing. So those that thought they wanted to bring their own smartphone and use that have kind of converted back to
using a tablet,
some other device.
Perfect. And then, Dave, I want to come back to you in just a second because I want you to hit on what the ELD mandate is and how somebody becomes registered as an ELD service. But I want to go back to Travis. And Travis, can you explain AOBRD for the group here?
Sure. Well, so an AOBRD refers to an automatic onboard recording device, and that is a device that was authorized back in 1988. And it's part of the same hours of service rules. Essentially, it's what the precursor of the ELD mandate is. These are classically heavy devices dedicated that are installed specifically in particular vehicles, but their incarnations go in a lot of different ways. We offer what we offer is an AOBRD, or can run as an AOBRD, as well as what I'm sure Craig's solution does as well. But the simplest way to describe it is it's an ELD light. It's an ELD without all of the very strict technical specifications that the ELD mandate sets forth, and it allows you a little more leeway with what is displayed, what's required on the roadside, and what's required in a compliance situation. So that's basically what AOBRD is.
AOBRD are the prior set of regs. ELD is the future set of regs, and the AOBRD regs can be grandfathered if put into use before December 18th for an additional 2 years. And then everybody must have ELD by that time.
And you may be asking, why are we spending so much time talking about this? I want to just emphasize, how does this tie into the current 3-phased approach for implementation? And I'll just pose the question, it's a softball to you guys, but is an AOBRD considered acceptable for the timeline for implementation for the ELD mandate?
Travis is nodding, and we know it to be. It's grandfathered under the mandate. You may use an AOBRD for 2 additional years if installed. And there are a few other small caveats, but if installed by December 18th, it can be used fully compliant with the mandate until December 16th of 2019. So
December 27th this year, I want to install an AOBRD. Can I do that?
You're out of luck. You may not.
December 1st, I can.
You may.
Perfect. And then Dave, I want to come back to you. Can you explain the ELD mandate, what it means, what the acronym means, and how do you become ELD certified?
Well, ELD is electronic logging device, and that term I think was coined in one of the congressional acts that mandated the ELD to happen. How a company registers, the FMCSA has created a registry process that these manufacturers have to meet a very, very strict set of criteria. I think it's well over 100 pages long of all the criteria that it must meet. The manufacturer must self-certify to the FMCSA that it meets everything within that criteria. The FMCSA does some cursory checking, and maybe we'll ask some questions, clarifying questions. But once those questions have been answered, they will post that device, that manufacturer, as an approved ELD on their registry.
Perfect. Thank you. so I just want to take a second here, go back to our audience. Again, thank you for joining. We really appreciate you guys jumping on this morning. I know you guys are busy with your operations, but we're here for you. So if you have any questions that are burning that you'd like to ask the panel of experts that we have here today, please feel free to, in your chat message system there, to go ahead and pose those questions, and we'll get those put up onto the screen and ask the panel here as you pose those questions. We do have some additional questions that we want to ask the panel here. So have you all seen the customers that have adopted the services, whether it be an AOBRD or an ELD? First, I want to touch on the fact that the industry itself has been really slow to adopt these services. So it's still roughly about 80–85% of the industry has not adopted anything, according to our recent research at truckstop.com. I understand you guys have seen some of the same within your research pieces, but so there's still a lot of folks out there that still have to adopt and pull in some of this technology into their operations. But those customers of yours that have adopted the technology, have they seen any reduction in their productivity after installing and adopting these services?
Dave, you want to go first? I'll follow.
Sure. There is definitely a learning curve, as providing support to help train, our clients and how to use the ELD. It's not something you just turn on and is going to be automatic. And so there's a number of weeks involved to get used to it, how it works, how to do edits. How to manage the back end if you're doing it yourself. As far as productivity, I haven't had my clients on them long enough to be able to quantify that. Everything I read in the industry trade magazines says to expect a 7 to 10% reduction in productivity, and I believe that to be true just because of the learning curve on how to.
Right. So I'll jump in, and then Travis will give you the last word. We've been offering AOBRDs for a number of years, and to Dave's point, the learning curve is there. The transition from paper logs to electronic logs is not as straightforward a process. There are systems to understand. You're now using a tablet and operating system changes, that kind of thing. But once the learning curve is overcome, then there actually are some efficiencies. Keeping paper logs is kind of a pain in the neck. AOBRDs and ELDs both automate the odometer entries, duty status changes, and changeovers are more or less automatic. So to the surprise of quite a few of our customers, they've actually gained some productivity once the learning curve is overcome, because frankly, E-logs are just simpler to maintain once the learning curve is in place than manually preparing paper logs. Travis, last word?
I agree with Craig. Speaking specifically to the learning curve, yes, that there is some learning curve. With our solution, I mean, there's some learning curve generally. With our solution, we've tried to make it just as intuitive as possible. We've tried to incorporate all of the most positive aspects of a user interface that our engineering team and our design team has been able to acquire over their years in these tech industries. So generally, our solution is very intuitive. I can't speak to HOS's solution, but I assume that a lot of man hours has gone into ensuring that user interface is very easily adoptable. So the onboarding doesn't take too long, but as to Craig's point, with the efficiencies that you'll see once the ELD solution is adopted and put to full use, because you now get to log in 1 minute increments rather than 15-minute increments, you can real-time real-time data on your logs, and you can actually save a lot. And that's what we've seen in a lot of our customers. You're going to save time rather than losing it. So
perfect. Thank you, Travis. I see a great question here from Luke, if we want to put that up here. So the question from Luke Kibbe is, does the ELD meet IFTA compliance requirements? I'm going to be compliant with IFTA tax reporting in each state jurisdiction.
Well, no, but they're qualified answers. I know Travis's solution, I know Dave's solution, and our solution provide IFTA data. So it's mileage by jurisdiction, whether it's a province in Canada or a state in the United States. We provide all of the rate tables for Oregon and their axle and gross vehicle weight. So IFTA data is necessary to populate the IFTA filings. We provide that data, but it does not fully automate the process, and it's not a compliance per se portion of the mandate. IFTA stands apart and is not encompassed by ELDs, although we three providers offer the IFTA data. Dave?
Craig's absolutely correct. It's the answer outright is no. ELDs track the driver. IFTA tracks the vehicle. It's apples and oranges. And what IFTA requires for record keeping is different, has some similarities, but is different than an ELD. An ELD required ping rate is the minimum is once every 60 minutes. Well, that's not good enough for IFTA. So if you have an ELD that pings every 60 minutes and you want to use that for IFTA, it may give you the data to produce your report, but it will not give you the back-end data to support an audit. And I can't tell you how many IFTA meetings I've been to where the auditors are studying ELDs and know the problems that they are going to see if someone uses electronic log data for their IFTA report.
Perfect. So that segues excellently into our next topic is exemptions. The reason why we decided to name this session Demystifying the ELD Mandate is because there just seems to be so much confusion around the topic. There seems to be so many different outlets putting out different pieces, opinion pieces around the mandate. So let's talk about exemptions for a second. At a high level, what are some of the exemptions that are available as it relates to the ELD mandate? So how would somebody be exempt from the mandate?
Well, the short answer to that question is each provider should go to the FMCSA website and understand precisely what the compliance with the mandate actually is. Because there are a number of outs that it's easy to find on the FMCSA website, whether your vehicle is too old or too small or requires 8 days of logs in a 30-day rolling window. There are some exemptions there. And rather than try to detail all of those, my suggestion would be go to the FMCSA mandate and read and understand whether or not you must be compliant with the mandate. Dave, you want to take a crack at that?
Well, I think in general, if you have to fill out a hours of service grid today, you need an ELD. If you do not have to fill out a log grid because you meet, say, for example, the short haul exemption, either with the under 26,000, 150 air mile radius short haul, or the 100 air mile radius for the trucks over 26,000. If you meet those, and I guess I emphasize truly meet that exemption, meaning you have to start and stop at the same location every day. You cannot stop out in the road and then pick on up. You don't meet the exemption at that point in time. Even though you may not go farther than 100 miles, if you don't come back to your base station at the end of the day and within the 14 or 12 hour workday, you don't meet the exemption. You have to have an ELD. But if you meet those exemptions, you do not have to have an ELD.
Travis, I have a specific question for you, and then I'll let you pick up where you're going to right there. But if I have a truck that's 2000, the year 2000, am I exempt?
Well, if the engine is manufactured in 2000, yeah, and that's just one of the exemptions of specifically the ELD mandate. I like to look at it in two different ways because I think a lot of the confusion comes when you don't have this distinction. There are two different exemptions. One is you're exempted from the records of duty status regulation, where you don't have to keep a record at all. And that's, as David was indicating, your 100 air mile radius, your 150 non-CDL air mile radius exemptions, as well as a number of others. And then there's the exemptions from the ELD mandate. And those are, as Craig indicated, when you only have to keep a record of duty status for 8 days or fewer in any 30-day rolling period, and whether you have the 1999 or previous model year engine manufacturer, as well as certain drive-away, tow-away operations. So it's important to understand that there's that distinction. One set of folks don't have to keep records at all. Other sets of folks have to keep records, but don't have to keep them on an ELD.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Travis. We have an excellent question from Scott Leckleader here that I want to go to. So this is perfect. What edits are allowed with an AOBRD, and are all these edits visible during a roadside inspection?
So since that's an AOBRD question, Travis, you and I can take that one. Edits are allowed in AOBRDs. The edits are allowed in ELDs as well. The primary difference is that the edits are stored and transmitted to law enforcement with every ELD. One of the key factors with choosing to be compliant with the mandate using an AOBRD is that the edits to the logs are not transmitted to law enforcement. You may have to recreate them in an audit, but they are not sent to law enforcement. In fact, under the 395.15 rule set for AOBRDs, the officer is shown a grid. Basically, it's a grid. And if transmitted to the officer will see a PDF of your grid. And that's basically all they get. Travis, you can add to this at the end, but law enforcement under the ELD mandate will be using a piece of software called ERODS, Electronic Record of Duty Status, and they will electronically analyze the logs with the pre-edited log, the post-edited log, a table of the log edits, and quite a bit more information. So without taking all the airtime, Travis, go ahead and add to that.
Yeah, that's basically right. The AOBRD, specifically the question was what type of edits are allowed. You can reallocate drive time from one driver to another, to the correct driver, or to an unassigned driver. You can, that's essentially the biggest difference, or the most forward edit. And as Craig was indicating, the ELD mandate requires that a vast amount of data is stored and made readily transferable to a compliance officer out in the field. Whereas with an AOBRD, as again Craig indicated, you're essentially just showing them the same log that you're showing them today, except it's on a display on your phone or on the tablet or on the dedicated piece of hardware that's in your vehicle. And those edits aren't made apparent in an AOBRD, but those edits would be made very apparent in the output file of an ELD during a.
It's also worth pointing out, Travis, that when you hand your screen to an officer, you're giving the officer permission to basically snoop around on that device. It's in his possession at that point in time. So our system, and I'm sure many others on the market, but our system locks out the entire device so that the officer can see only the grid graph of duty status for that officer to see. That's it. No other data is offered to the safety official.
That's a very important point, Craig. You're right. Now, let's keep in mind, an officer can only look at what you give him permission to look at. But our system, as well as Craig's system, allow you an additional tool to protect your data on your phone, where you can lock down and only allow it to be unlocked with a personal identification code that you input at any point during your DOT inspection. So yeah, that's an important privacy mechanism.
While we're on the topic of exemptions and roadside inspections and what happens during those inspections, I want to go back to a question that we hear a lot at truckstop.com, and I've also heard a lot just in the industry around this question. There seems to be confusion around the implementation timeline of the mandate, what happens during that implementation timeline, And more recently, the DOT and FMCSA have come out and said that they will not put someone out of service until April. So again, the confusion that we hear is the timeline now moved to April, or is the December timeline still intact? And what happens during that December to April timeline as it relates to roadside inspections and being put out of service versus citations? So Dave, if you want to start.
Absolutely. December 18th, you must have an ELD or an AOBRD if you meet the requirements. If you do not have one on that December 18th date, and you're still keeping paper logs, and you show the officer your paper logs on December 18th, you will get a violation for not having an ELD. All the way up to April 1st, you will get a violation for not having an ELD, but as long as you're keeping your paper logs, they will let you continue on. On April 1st, that excuse is going away. If you don't have an ELD, you're going to be put out of service until you get one. So really the distinction is you're still going to get a violation, you just won't be put out of service until April 1st. We just had a client that put in the ELD, he wasn't using it, but he wasn't keeping paper logs either, and the officer said, you're out of service. So you've got to have, at least in this interim time period, if you haven't installed your ELD yet, still keep paper logs so that you can keep traveling.
So the key thing is the FMCSA has created inadvertently some confusion.
Yes.
Right? The confusion is I don't have to have one by April 1st. That is incorrect. You must have an ELD or an AOBRD by December 18th. Failing to have one will not place you out of service, but it is not going to spare you the violation. Kind of the key point is so many of these offerings are affordable enough that a single citation for not having one is way more expensive than the cost of having one and learning to use it and becoming compliant, because there are no more outs. I think your next question is going to be, is this mandate in fact going to be in place in all of the jurisdictions where it's required? And I think we'll all nod our head in agreement. It is. There are no more outs.
Well, I'm going to go to Travis for this one. You said you're from Texas, and I believe there's a congressman named Senator or Congressman Babin who has a piece of legislation out there. So do you want to touch on that a little bit, Travis, and tell us where that sits?
Sure, I'll be glad to. So yes, Brian Babin, congressman from just east of Houston, introduced a standalone bill, which is the only one that still is pending, to delay the ELD mandate by 2 years. I can tell you that it is not going to pass, in my opinion. It's currently sitting in a committee that is controlled by two congresspeople who have already voted against delaying the mandate 4 times. So essentially, I can talk about this. I have talked about this for half hours at a time. But the fact is, it is not going to be delayed. The enforcement is not going to be delayed. You will begin getting cited, and violations will begin to be recorded on December 18th, even if you won't be put out of service. And I want to stress that FMCSA has made every indication that they intend on enforcing very critically any ELD violations that they see on December 18th. Even if they won't put you out of service, you will get cited. It will affect your CSA score. So waiting to adopt is just not a tenable position right now.
And I'd like to add to that 1 second here. I apologize, but something to also note on this is just because they're saying they're not going to put you out of service, it means they're not going to put you out of service for not having ELD. That doesn't mean that if your logs are incorrect, that they're not going to put you down for a 10-hour restart minimum or even a 34-hour restart. So something big to remember on that. So just because they're saying they're not going to put you out of service doesn't mean they're going to let you run rampant with your hours either.
Perfect.
Good
And
point.
another panelist here, this is Jeremy Fife with truckstop.com. I apologize, I didn't get an introduction done at the very beginning, but this is Jeremy Fife. He's a regulatory analyst at Truckstop. He's part of our panel here today. So we've talked about this timeline for implementation. Would like Jeremy to fill this question. What is the 3 phases? What phase are we currently in? What are we heading into next? And what does the 3rd phase mean? What are those dates?
So right now, the names of those, I apologize, escaping what the phase names are, but we are in the implementation phase right now.
So phase 1.
Yeah, we're in phase 1 right now, and then phase 2 is the ELD mandate itself, which is coming up on December 18th of this year, and then phase 3 is the end of the grandfather clause, which is December 16th of 2019.
Perfect.
So right now, what you have is implementation date is the time that you have to get used to the mandate. If you're not used to the mandate, come December 18th, you're going to run the risk of not knowing how to work your logs and how everything works, and you run the risk of those citations that Travis and everybody else has talked about.
What are acceptable forms of record keeping in those 3 phases? So right now,
right
phase
now,
1.
yeah. So phase 1 right now, you can have either your ELD. If you have an ELD, you have to be completely compliant with the ELD mandate. Or you can use AOBRD, and you can continue using your paper logs. You just have to clarify that you're using paper logs to your agent that's inspecting you, your CDSA agent that's inspecting you. Come December 18th of this year, you must have either an ELD or an AOBRD, and your logs must be electronic. If you're using AOBRD, you can supplement those at that point with paper logs, but the main portion of your logs must be electronic. And then come after December 16th of 2019, which is the full-fledged implementation date, you must have an ELD, and you're not going to get around it any other way.
So I want to move on, and this is a big topic that we hear as well, is that this data now that's going to be generated from this vehicle and the driver who's keeping track of all these records, what happens to that data? Who has access to it? Is it, Big Brother's just going to have access to all this information? And if I'm just going to be so blunt, we at truckstop.com, obviously a freight matching service, we've partnered with some vendors out there to help our customers be compliant. That's what the panel consists of today. In short, the mandate itself really, to be honest, just sucks. But we want to help those, who haven't adopted, who have questions, obviously, through this transitionary period. And so I want to address the question out there that's lingering is, who has access to this information that's coming off these AOBRDs and ELDs? Is it Big Brother just is going to have this breadth of information and it's just going to be made available to anybody and everybody in the industry? Or is it more privatized? So I'll actually start with Travis, and if you want to field that one first, Travis.
Yeah, very importantly, we take the privacy of our customers' information very, very seriously. And I think that's one of the benefits, of our company being a technology-first company. Nobody has access to our data except for our customers and us. So I'll tell you that while we haven't had to answer any subpoenas or court orders to date for our data, that if and when we do, we will fight them with every aspect of our legal capabilities to protect our customers' data. That's the most important thing, and the trust in our customers. Our customers' trust in us about the privacy of their data is paramount to us. So that's the long answer. The short answer is me and you. That's it.
Perfect. Anything to add in here, Dave?
Well, I think the data that the FMCSA is going to receive is a very defined set of data that is taken in through, like Craig said, their eRODS software. It's actually the eROD software is going to be housed at the FMCSA. All that data is going to go to them. It's going to produce a report that the roadside officer can access and see what the potential violations could be. And then we'll go back to the driver and ask, okay, it's indicating that there might be a violation. Do you have a notation here that would explain that? So I mean, that's the data that's transmitted and received. Just like with paper logs, the data is only required to be kept for 6 months. So there really is no difference. There is not a big computer out there monitoring your truck as it goes down the highway, where somebody from enforcement is just sitting there watching you through your ELD. It just does not happen. You just think about it like your smartphone. I mean, your smartphone, if they got a subpoena, they could track you and know right where you are. The same thing could happen with an ELD, but it would take more than just someone making a decision. I want to know where that truck is.
And the last word too is that there are some subtle differences between how data is managed from within AOBRDs and ELDs. But the basic concept is that the data, the driving data and the logs belong to the drivers. The device that's in the vehicle is the carrier's responsibility. But if a driver leaves one carrier and goes to work with another carrier, his logs go with him. And we have some requirements to make sure that data is accessible to that driver, even if he changes from carrier to carrier. But to both Travis and Dave's point, there isn't a warehouse of data that can be accessed, and it isn't Big Brother at this point. It may feel like it, but the data belongs to the driver, the carrier, and it's warehoused, stored, and secured by the provider.
Perfect. And I do want to go to the audience again with another question here, but before we do that, I just want to ask the question, what is the expectation during a roadside inspection? What can folks plan on, and how is the data pulled directly from the device? That seems to be a question that nobody answers. So my understanding is there's 4 different ways data can be extracted using E-rods. What does that look like, and what can a driver during a roadside inspection expect during that E-rods extraction?
I can take that one to start. At the first, I expect a lot of confusion because the enforcement folks have had limited training on this as well. You know, where you as the carrier, the driver, are going to have one ELD in your truck, these enforcement folks are going to see, I think there's 135 different ones out there. So there's a learning curve on their end. So, at first, I think the secondary method that the FMCSA wants an enforcement guy to use is look at the display. The primary method for determining if there's a log violation, what they want is this transmission of data. Either web services or through an email, through a USB device that plugs into an enforcement guy's laptop that has the E-rod software on it. Those are the methods, but it all gets run through the E-rods software. And if you're in a spot where there is no transmission, you're going to fall back to the display. But at first, these enforcement guys are going to fall back to some very rudimentary questions. How many hours do you have left in your day? How long have you been driving? How long do you have left in your 7-day or your 6-day work week? If you can't answer those right away, you stumble over those questions, they're going to dig deeper.
So, Travis, you have something to say here?
Yeah, David is absolutely correct. I would also expect a lot of confusion at the very beginning. What we're dealing with is not only 135 different providers, some of which are going to have data accessible in one particular way, and some are going to have it accessible in another one of these 4 arrangements. You also have 50 different, states, plus DC, and all of the provinces of Canada, each of which are going to be trained and they're going to choose different enforcement mechanisms, and they're going to have their officers wanting to do things in different ways. So it's important to have the data that is necessary to be transmitted on the roadside, readily available and available in numerous different ways, which is, I know that's what we make sure that that transmission can occur in a number of different ways: Bluetooth, web services, USB, etc. and I assume that the rest of the panelists or your Craig's solution probably does the same. But that's very, very important.
It's worth pointing out too, Thane, that there are some differences between how data is transmitted for those using AOBRD. The AOBRD regs do not have those same 4 transmission methods superimposed upon it. We fall back to the prior regs, and basically it's print or display. If the officer wants an emailed copy, the driver can say, well, I'm operating as an AOBRD, you're not entitled to ask for that. But if the driver wishes to comply, then most AOBRD solutions also have email delivery, but it'll again still be a simple graphical depiction of the grid.
Okay, so they're looking at the grid on the device. Would an AOBRD user still potentially be required to fax or print the log?
So there is a requirement for either printing or offering the visual display. So we would expect those that don't have in-cab printers to say, officer, here is my log, and it's up to the driver then to decide whether or not to honor a request for an electronic delivery if the officer requested it in the first place. Travis, I see you nodding your head, so it's
exactly right.
The BRD regs are written.
Exactly right.
Throw in a comment that a lot of people aren't aware of. With an ELD, the data that's transmitted is encrypted.
Mm-hmm.
So the data cannot be sent to a roadside officer because it's encrypted. It has to be run through the EROD software that the FMCSA maintains, unless that officer happens to have a laptop with the EROD software on it, which none of them do at this point. So it's encrypted. So that's a difference between the AOBRD and ELD.
Right, perfect. I do want to get to our question of our audience here. We've got some questions popping in, so let's go ahead and go out to the audience. Seth, do we have a question? So how can ELDs, I'm sorry, can you scroll up here a little bit? Sorry about this. How can ELDs help prove driver coercion or protect drivers from potential violations due to driver coercion? So that's a burning topic. So Jeremy's shaking his head. I'll ask Jeremy a question. That's good, Jeremy.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Luke. So the biggest thing here is the FMCSA was sued by several different groups when they tried to hand down the EOBR, which is Electronic Onboard Recorder, back in 2011. Part of that mandate, the courts ruled, did not have enough stipulations behind protecting drivers from harassment or coercion from their carriers or shippers or brokers. So they went through and elaborated on Rule 392.3, which is the ill or fatigued driver rule. And this rule basically states that at no point in time can a driver be asked to drive if they don't feel like it. And if they are, the FMCSA then handed down a ruling that stated drivers could then look for civil penalties against the carrier if that's the case. And we've seen 2 such instances of this happening, and most recently in New York for $275,000 on behalf of the carrier, or excuse me, on behalf of the driver against the carrier. So this is something that's going to be taken very, very seriously, and drivers have every ability to overturn any issue they have here based on 392.3 in particularly. So something really, really good that the FMCSA handed down on this topic.
I think that goes beyond just the carrier. I think
it goes to shippers.
It goes to shippers and receivers. So, one of our clients had a question. I think it was yesterday about, they had a delivery and they had a delivery appointment, but they didn't end up unloading them for 7 hours. And of course, he ran out of hours, and so he was on duty, legally on duty as he was supposed to have been. He ran out of hours. So now what? The receiver said you cannot park. You've got to move your truck. You can't park in our. So the receiver is telling him you have to move, but he's out of hours. So he's being coerced to have to move down the road somewhere to the closest, safest spot to park. So, is there liability there on that receiver? There could be.
So it's obviously a burning question. There is opportunity to mitigate that through the ELD mandate that's been addressed. So I'm sure there's additional questions. Jeremy, the rule set again was what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the rule is 392.3, and it's based on driver harassment. And that rule is it's forbidding drivers, carriers, brokers, or shippers from asking a driver to drive while they're ill or fatigued or feel they cannot, or if they're out of hours and they're being asked to drive at that point. Any of those three items can be proven, then a driver has proof against the carrier, broker, shipper, or in this case, a receiver, to file a civil lawsuit that showed that they were being forced to drive when they were not allowed to via legally.
This may be one of the bright spots where drivers don't want a telematic device in their truck in the first place, right? We broadly understand that that's the feeling within the community of drivers. This may be an instance where having a telematic device connected to an ELD or even an AOBRD may help the evolutionary process of coercion be substantially minimized, because the telematic device can provide substantial data that the driver would use to make such a claim, right?
And that's important. I'd like to chime in here. You know, one of the things that we've been able to do here at Keep Truckin' is keep. Obviously, this is a feeling that's widely shared among the industry, and it's felt really acutely with owner operators and small fleets, because I mean, the bigger fleets often have a lot more power, and they can, you know, the bargaining power, and they can ensure that their, you know, drivers aren't held up, and it's just a different type of interaction. With your small fleets being held up this much, it causes more dangerous driving, frankly. And we've got some data that we've been able to crunch, and we've found out that there is, in a lot of instances, more dangerous driving that occurs after these types of delays. And here at Keep Truckin', we are taking an active role in trying to address that, among other issues that are paramount with our audience here, owner operators and small fleets, including, you know, parking issues, the hours of service rules in whole and in total. You know, we understand that those are big issues that are concerning to everybody in this industry. And, you know, just as a closing remark, because unfortunately I've got to run here in just a few minutes. You know, I think that we've gotten a lot of really good information out of this panel today. And, you know, the main things to think about here are that the ELD mandate requires that you get an ELD if you keep a record of duty status for more than 8 days today. That's a basic way to think about it. And next is that waiting is not really an option at this point. You're going to need to get one. You're going to need to get one quick. And I encourage you to do your homework. Make sure that you find a company that you feel comfortable with, and that you know is going to be found compliant out on the roadside. And I know that Keep Truckin' offers that. I'm sure that Craig's company offers that as well. But I encourage you to do your homework, because there's a lot of fly-by-night companies out there that you know, aren't going to be around in the next 6 months. So it's important to get a solution that you feel good for the marketplace.
Yeah, so excellent segue there, Travis. And Travis, we just want to thank you for your time and your expertise in joining the panel today. Again, thanks to Keep Truckin' and Travis and their team over there. Excellent group and great opportunity there. So as we see on the screen here, eld.truckstop.com, that's where Truckstop has gone out and partnered with industry leaders. This creates, again, a lot of ambiguity, the self-certification process and what happens there, and who's a legitimate company and who's not. And not that we're trying to degrade anybody in the market, that's not our intent, but what Truckstop wanted to do with our customer base, because such a large cross-section of them do not have any type of solution. And of course, we want them to be successful as this phase 2 into phase 3 of this implementation timeline come to fruition here. We really wanted to partner with those that we knew had solutions that would be ELD compliant, that had the support, both from a financial aspect, as we talked to Keep Truckin', and their affiliation with Google, Hours of Service Reporter and Connected Holdings. Dave and his company, Glostone Trucking Solutions, been around for over a few decades here. So stable companies. There's nearly, there's probably over 100 registrants on the FMCSA certification list today. And the real question, that lingers out there is, are those companies going to be around in 6 months? Are those companies going to be able to support the mandate? One of the most expensive things as it relates to from a vendor's perspective is the cost of hardware, and it's technology. It's going to break. It's going to malfunction. And can I get my replacement in an 8-day period, more than likely in an advanced replacement scenario? I'm not going to be at my home. If I'm an over-the-road truck driver, I'm not going to be at my home very frequently. So the idea of shipping it to my home or stopping off at Best Buy to grab one of these is not a realistic scenario, or 24/7, 365 customer support. So we really sought out companies that were stable, that had a business plan, that would get our customers to compliance. So really want to spend some time and talk about that. And again, our partnerships here, but we're winding down. We have a few minutes left. Would love to get to a few more questions before we close out here.
I'm gonna sign off, guys. I do have to run. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's really good to see you guys. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Travis, and keep trucking. Appreciate your participation here today.
Thanks.
So let's get to Miguel's question here. So wondering what credentials any of these guys have. Can you scroll up here a little bit so I can get the rest of the question? To be able to speak on behalf of the industry. So I'll start right here with Dave. So Dave, your service bureau has been in business for how long, and how long have you been involved in the industry?
20 years. I serve as president of the North American Transportation Services Association. I'm on the Industry Advisory Committee for IFTA. I'm on the Industry Advisory Committee for the IRP. I've attended many of their conferences. Had a conference in Washington, D.C. Last month where we had the directors of the FMCSA come speak to us and give us their expertise on this very issue. So, me personally actively involved in the industry at the highest levels to get the information straight from the horse's mouth.
Sure, and HOS Reporter and its partnership with Connected Holdings. Connected Holdings is, as you guys know, because we've done some work together, has been decades in the telematics space. They have 3+ million connected devices. So from the hardware perspective, that's our industry partner. Our software team began in the government space, government telematics and tracking, and it lent itself very, very well to a full implementation for ELD, from which we then deconstructed the AOBRD. So Miguel, good question. We come with our street cred, and I think that was part of the vetting process that Truck Stop undertook to make sure that its partners were financially stable, but also had the depth of experience to do it right.
Absolutely. We'll talk about a few of the vendors who are on the panel today, but nonetheless, we have JJ Keller, we have GPS Insight, we have OmniTrax, to name a few that we've also partnered with. And all those folks were vetted very thoroughly. We looked at their hardware, we looked at their hours of service, software, things of that nature. We, as truckstop.com, did have a solution in the market, UDrove, which was in the market for nearly 10 years. We decided that in the best interest of our customers, it would be better to partner as opposed to provide the solution ourselves. So we wanted to seek out the best folks in the industry to partner with, and again, who we knew would take care of our customers. And I want to take a step back, and we've talked a lot about the mandate, the rules itself, but why have this panel? Why are we here today? And why did we partner with who we wanted to partner with? And I think it's important to note that Truck Stop has never lobbied for the mandate. We didn't, of course, want this necessarily to happen, but it is here, it's a reality. So how do we make the best with the lemons that have been given to us, and making lemonade, so to speak. But the other thing that was really good about the partnerships that we sought out is that each one of our panelists in particular today, and the companies that they represent, they all have an affinity to transportation, and specifically the 1 to 20 truck market in particular, which is the largest section, cross-section of the industry itself, the for-hire carriers. So each one of them, again, going back to and just speaking plainly, the mandate itself sucks. So what do we do with it? And we wanted to focus with partners that didn't just want to help companies comply, but also wanted to help companies be more productive or get additional value out of the services that they have. So we think we have time for one more question. I want to go, do we have any questions, Seth, or is everybody kind of signing off here? We have time for another question if we have any out there within the audience.
You can pull in.
Yeah, so I'll just, while we're waiting for another question to come through, I guess, now what? The mandate's here, what happens? And what advice would you guys give to somebody who's currently looking at purchasing either an AOBRD or an ELD? What's the best advice that you would give them?
I think we would say in unison, don't wait, right?
Yeah, don't wait just because you don't want to be installing one on the 17th and thinking you're going to know how to use it on the 18th. You need to, there is a learning curve and you need to start right away. But I think before even that, really determine what you want. Do you want just an ELD, or do you want an ELD plus I want to be able to do IFTA and IRP, or do I want to do DVIRs? Would I like to do record bills of ladings and have them electronically stored? I mean, these devices come with all kinds of bells and whistles. If you only want an ELD, don't buy an ELD device with all the bells and whistles. You don't need it all. So first step, in my mind, is determine what you want, how you're going to use it first, and then start to go out and look at your vendors.
Actually, Dave, why don't you take 1 minute and just describe the solution, and then I'll do the same, or what's included and what kind of the target market would be for your solution.
For GeoTab is the one that we resell, and again, I mentioned, I think at the beginning, we refer to other vendors if that isn't appropriate for their operation. But GeoTab comes with the ELD and the IFTA tracking as a core base unit with its. It does have the capability, kind of like a smartphone, where there's an app for that, where GeoTab will integrate. It has over 100 different apps within its marketplace, so that you can customize it beyond that to what you want.
And then I would take that and say we offer both an AOBRD and an ELD in the same package. You can transition from AOBRD to ELD. We work very hard on the usability of it, but we also think that we stand apart from many other providers in that we have encoded every single rule set from every single jurisdiction, all the way down to the Michigan construction season exemptions. So it's very important if you want to pick a solution and you broadly travel as a carrier throughout the United States, you're going to run across these rule sets. So ease of use was one. We custom built our ELD/AOBRD device to be future expandable for external sensor capabilities. So if we want to put ultrasonic cargo sensors on for less than truckload load matching, for future integrations for things, we tried to build a future-proof system that was easy to use, has both AOBRD and ELD functionality, and would give the DVIR experience take less time. The IFTA data is also included, as Dave pointed out. So we have the core functionality that owner-operators basically need to gain efficiency from having this mandate imposed upon them instead of just mandate compliance.
Perfect, thank you. I do see another question from Scott. This is an excellent question here. We want to get to this. And we're running a little bit over, but we want to spend some additional time here because this is a great question and one that I love to speak on in particular. But there are rumors out there that as many as 25 states can't even enforce the mandate because they haven't adopted the federal rule of their books. True or no? So I would state this at a broader level, and then I'll turn it over to the panel here. But my understanding is that the eRODS technology has not fully been deployed to every jurisdiction. I don't know the number exactly, Scott, but it's not been fully deployed to every single, all 50 jurisdictions. And furthermore, I would add to that to my knowledge, there's not been a roadside inspection conducted extracting ELD data using the eRods technology. So that's my understanding, but we'll turn it over to the professionals over here.
I think what Scott's referring to is that the FMCSA uses state partners to enforce. And if the state has not adopted the ELD mandate, how can it force it? It's breaking its own law if it tries to. However, Scott, most states have an automatic process where their legislature adopts the FMCSA regulations. And I know in the state of Oregon, they simply adopt the FMCSA regulations, including Part 395, which is the hours of service. And if the hours of service has the ELD mandate in it, which it does, they adopt it. There's a couple of states that I know of, Texas and Florida, actually, their legislatures went out and specifically passed that Texas, in an intra-state operation, is going to enforce the ELD mandate, as well as Florida. So, and Nebraska. So some of these states have it automatically within their legislatures every year. Some of them have to specifically vote on it. Could there be one out there that has not voted on it yet? Possibly, but to have some states and some states not, that's just not going to happen.
Right, the states all have their own safety mandate, and vehicle inspections are part of that safety mandate. So regardless of how the data is transferred to the FMCSA through the eRods and back down to the law enforcement individual, it isn't a preclusion. It's inclusionary in its very nature. So whether the states actually even get around to adopting it or not does not mean that state and law enforcement, we're in Idaho, the Idaho State Police will conduct inspections. If the inspections are out of compliance, they will enforce the rules. So as they always have. So it's a technicality, but it isn't one that's going to hold up enforcement.
And I'm just going to add to what Thane said, and Thane's 100% right. The information regarding the eRods has not been given out to every state. That being said, not every state, after speaking to several field officers myself, not every state has even received CVSA training on this yet. So here we are a month and a half out, not even a month and a half out, we'll be 50 days out, and we've still the states that haven't been trained fully yet on this will lead to some of that confusion that Dave and Craig were talking about.
I think the point is that drivers cannot afford to not deploy based on their state not having adopted a code, because that almost certainly will lead to safety violations and citations.
Agreed. So again, emphasizing, I think what you guys said so well earlier is there is going to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions during a roadside inspection, but that doesn't mean that the roadside inspection won't happen, it won't take place. And so regardless of what jurisdictions have or have not adopted certain eRods technology and how they're enforcing it, the mandate is what it is. And so we just need to make sure that we're prepared for that. So in closing, unless we have any additional questions lingering out there, just wanted to thank our panel again, Travis Baskin with Keep Truckin, David Gray with Glostone Trucking Solutions, and Craig Jolly with HOS Reporter. Just thank you guys so much for your participation. Lastly, go out to the ELD marketplace, eld.truckstop.com. You can find more out about these vendors. You can also request information about their products through the marketplace, and they have representatives that are dedicated to these inquiries that come in. And it doesn't just have to be about product. You can reach out to those folks, and they're more than happy to, of course, address any questions that you may have. You can also email Jeremy at truckstop.com with any legislative or ELD mandate questions. And your email address, Jeremy, is regulatory. Sorry, go ahead.
We're actually going to put it up on the screen right now.
Okay.
We're going to put my direct email address up on the screen right now.
So if you have any additional questions post this, of course, Jeremy can triage those questions as they come in. But I do see, sorry, James has a question here.
That's just a comment.
Okay, sorry, a comment. So again, just wanted to thank everybody. Thank you, audience, so much for you're what makes Truck Stop tick. And so we really appreciate you guys joining here today and appreciate our panel. So thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
That was fun.